And perhaps most importantly, I am still a hypocrite. All of the principles that I espouse in these videos are things that I strive for, not things that I have achieved. And so the reality is that I fall short of my own ideals each and every day. Alright, so it was my birthday on the 29th, and I wanted to make a video similar to the video I made last year on my birthday where I reflected on the past decade of my life. And as you can see from that thumbnail, I wasn't too happy with myself. If you haven't seen that video or any of the videos that I made before this year, I was basically just looking back and mulling over the fact that I'd spent the majority of my 20s ruining my life. I had dropped out of college on 3 separate occasions, and I allowed the shame from those failures to essentially keep me trapped in a state of extreme emotional instability. I was aimless, isolated, and deeply depressed. My friend, who is a licensed therapist, actually suggested that I get tested for bipolar disorder because I would spend 3 to 6 months in a state of almost aggressive optimism only to hit a wall and spend the next 6 to 9 months essentially catatonic. And in those 6 to 9 months, everything that I'd built up prior to hitting that wall would evaporate, making it that much harder to climb out of the hole that I dug myself in. But thanks to the people around me, I would, at least for a time, manage to do just that. And things would start to look up again until I would hit that wall and the whole cycle would just repeat. And that was basically my 20s in a nutshell. Constant emotional fluctuation with a perpetual undertone of crippling existential depression. And so I spent that last video talking about all the things that went wrong in my 20s and how I hope to make my 30s a much better decade. And I have to say that so far, things are off to a decent start. After a year and a half of shouting into the void shouted back and was generally okay with some of the things that I have to say. And before I continue, I just have to express the unmitigated, overwhelming feeling of gratitude that I have for the feedback on my videos, both positive and negative. It is truly an indescribable feeling to have your thoughts and intentions received and accepted, whether in agreement or disagreement. If I never make another video after this, I will forever be grateful for just having the opportunity to experience what I've experienced over this past month. And so I just want to make sure that I take the time to offer a truly heartfelt thank you to everybody who has watched my videos. Whether you agree with my perspectives or wholeheartedly denounce them, I really do appreciate you taking the time to engage. I say this all the time, but we really do need a better phrase for expressing gratitude than thank you. It simply doesn't capture the immense feelings of gratitude that human beings can experience and express. But unfortunately, for now, it's the best that we have. And so for a final time, at least in this video, thank you. But anyway, as I was saying, I did want to take some time to reflect on this past year and tie this reflection into a larger issue that may at first glance seem innocuous, but when examined a little closer becomes a potentially problematic aspect of our society. And I'm sure you can tell from the title, but the concept that I want to take a closer look at is our understanding of what it means to love yourself. Because again, at first glance, this is a harmless phrase and one that is only meant to inspire kindness and compassion within ourselves for ourselves. And so how could anybody have a problem with this notion? And just to be clear, I have nothing against this message, and I believe that it is an ideal that we should strive for. However, I do believe that in our application of this ideal, we tend to create more problems than we solve. I think that our execution of this concept may be stunting our growth as individuals and as a collective, and so I think we should take a closer look at what it actually means to love ourselves. And I think the first thing that we have to do is to try to define love in this context. Obviously, love can mean a myriad of different things to different people depending on the situation, and so I'm not going to try to combine the various conceptualizations of love into a single definable concept. I don't really have the authority to do that. I'm just going to try to do here what I did in my video about friendship, where I tried to give a definition that was determinative of the relationship without imposing that definition on anybody else. So for example, one definition of the word friend is one attached to another by affection or esteem. But growing up, I was attached to my father by affection and esteem, and yet I wouldn't have called him my friend. So this definition, while alluding to an aspect of friendship, does not encompass the entire concept of friendship, at least in my opinion. And so I'm going to try to do the same thing for the concept of love that I did with friendship and give a definition that encompasses the entire concept and not just an aspect. And fortunately for me, that definition already exists, because when you look up the definition of love in Webster's dictionary, you get all of this. But this definition, the unselfish, loyal, and benevolent concern for the good of another, in my opinion, encapsulates every possible relationship where love can exist. It describes the love between parent and child, a group of friends, people in a committed relationship, etc. It even embodies the love that one can feel for a particular object or activity. For example, I love hip-hop not just because I enjoy listening to it, but because I genuinely want the best for the art form. Basically, the point I'm making is that this definition of love is, in my opinion, an all-encompassing definition, unlike some of the other ones. This definition connotes a specifically romantic conceptualization of the concept of love, and these other two definitions rely on personal connection or shared interests to bring about a level of affection that crosses the boundary from like to love. But it is possible to love people or things that we've never met, interacted with, or share any common interests with, as exemplified by the notion that people can love humanity or love specific species like birds, reptiles, mammals, etc., even if they've never physically interacted with these groups. And so this definition is the one that I believe is the most appropriate. And just to be clear, I do think that there are other aspects that need to be added in order to form a more complete definition of the concept of love, but for now, this definition is adequate. So if we try to apply this definition to the concept of loving ourselves, we can paraphrase and say that loving ourselves means wanting what's best for ourselves. And I think that many of us agree with this notion and would even say that we genuinely adhere to this idea. However, I would argue that this isn't always the case. There's a difference between doing what is best for ourselves and simply doing what we want to do. We don't always want what's best for us, and we don't always want what we need. Doing what is best for you often runs in contradiction to doing what you want to do. And this happens all the time. For example, should I go to bed right now, or can I stay up a few more minutes scrolling through social media? Or should I unwind and go out with my friends tonight, or stay home and get some sleep because I have a long day tomorrow? I think that doing what is best for us is almost always a difficult thing. And this is an entirely separate topic, but I think it needs to be addressed in this discussion. I think doing what is best for ourselves is made nearly impossible by the way we've structured our societies. For example, it may be best for you to eat a salad for lunch and not another Big Mac from McDonald's, but let's be real. You only have 30 minutes for lunch before you have to work another 6 to 8 hours straight without a break, so are you really gonna eat a salad just so you can be hungry again in an hour? Or are you gonna get that Big Mac that, sure, will feel awful in the morning, but will at least give you the energy to get through your shift? So yeah, circumstances don't always allow us to do what's best for ourselves, and that has to be acknowledged in this discussion. However, even in situations where we aren't restricted by our circumstances, it is exceedingly difficult to always choose to do what is best for us over what we want to do. And I think that even for those of us who have that luxury, we will still choose to do what we want over what is best the majority of the time. The point is that doing what is best for you is hard. And so loving yourself, in my opinion, isn't always this flowery image of what can best be described as pampering yourself and or self-indulgence or self-complacency. Loving yourself is grueling work. And again, just to be clear, due to our circumstances being so inconducive to our well-being, taking a day off to treat yourself may 100% be the necessary thing to do. So please don't misunderstand what I'm speaking against here. Specifically, what I'm addressing here is how, thanks in part to the nature of social media, I believe this flowery idea of what it means to love yourself has completely overtaken what real self-love is, which is the process of facing the hard truths about ourselves and doing what is best for ourselves in order to become the people that we're trying to be. And instead, we've started to frame the concept of self-love as this sort of self-complacency, where we look at ourselves and instead of acknowledging the aspects of our personalities that are lacking, we essentially glorify our behaviors and declare, well, that's just me. Now, I have to be careful here because in the age of social media, we are constantly being fed images of lifestyles and body types that are unrealistic and harmful to our collective sense of self-worth. And so there are spaces where self-love is applied to essentially signal to the masses that we should not allow these images to dictate our self-esteem or lack thereof. And I do not disagree with that messaging at all. In my opinion, this is 100% a necessary aspect of self-love. I do believe that in order to face ourselves so that we can ultimately do what is best for ourselves, we first have to learn to accept ourselves outside of the undue influences that we are subjected to from external sources, be it social media or even the people closest to us with whom we've formed meaningful relationships with. This is so important, and I am not speaking against this aspect of self-love. I'm just saying that, again, in my opinion, this isn't the entire picture. I believe that this is a preliminary step to practicing real self-love, which requires us to move past the acceptance phase and into the active phase, where we try to implement changes in our behavior in order to achieve what is actually best for ourselves. And so for my 31st birthday, I wanted to put my money where my mouth is and try to do just that. I want to be honest with myself because even though this is still really difficult for me to say for whatever reason, I do love myself and I want what's best for myself. And it's because I want what's best for myself that I have to admit that I am nowhere close to becoming the person that I want to be in this life. And this is for so many reasons. For starters, I am still very quick to anger and rage in situations that don't call for it, which results in me taking a much longer time than necessary to deal with the issues in front of me. I am still extremely selfish with my time, often feeling resentful towards others for doing nothing more than inquiring about my help, even though I am often well compensated for the effort, and even though they make it a point to emphasize just how valuable my help was to them. I am still mentally weak, and I allow little inconveniences that most people would shrug off to take hold of me and control my mood and outlook for extended periods of time. I am still extremely stubborn with my convictions, and at times fail to see the truth of a situation simply because it disagrees with what I believe the truth should be. I still find it extremely difficult to admit when I'm wrong, even though I would place this indicator of self-awareness at the top of the list in terms of traits that I deem important in a friend or partner. I am still emotionally unavailable to the people who are closest to me, and I don't allow them to share in my most joyous or most painful experiences. I often still choose isolation because, well, after a decade of exclusively seeking it out, isolation has just become a natural reflex for me. I am still extremely prideful, and I place value on things and behaviors that I know are unhelpful to me. I value putting my head down and getting through a difficult situation without bringing anybody else into my turmoil, and yet at almost every point where I've allowed someone into my problems, that decision has at the very least been a part of the reason that I was able to pull through. And perhaps most importantly, I am still a hypocrite. All of the principles that I espouse in these videos are things that I strive for, not things that I have achieved. And so the reality is that I fall short of my own ideals each and every day, which means that I am just as guilty as the people that I'm calling out, even if it is in very different contexts. And so for me, loving myself doesn't mean simply accepting all of this as just a part of who I am and then taking myself out to a spa day. Loving myself means confronting all of this and then making a promise to myself to deal with these shortcomings in my nature for the rest of my life. And so I may never actually get to the point where I stop being a hypocrite, but if I truly love myself the way that I say I do, I have to keep trying to reach that goal. And so this is why I think there's a misconception around what it actually means to love yourself. Acceptance is the first part, but the promise to do the work to fix yourself is the next, and in my opinion, the most important part. And this is why I think that loving ourselves is grueling, taxing work, and the images that we paint of this concept don't do enough to capture the realities of this ideal, and instead present self-love as self-pampering, self-complacency, and self-indulgence. Working on ourselves is the most important thing we can do in our lifetimes, in my opinion. And I just think that if we keep allowing ourselves to avoid that work, even if it's done with the best of intentions, then as I mentioned before, we will stunt our growth as individuals, but more importantly, we will stunt our growth as a collective. But in any case, I think that's going to be it for this one. If you made it this far, thank you so much for indulging me. I truly can't thank you enough for being willing to hear me out. It is not a small thing that whether you agree or disagree with me, you were willing to hear my entire viewpoint. I really wish there was a better way to foster conversation through this medium so that I could reciprocate the kindness that you've shown me. But for now, I'll just have to rely on the aforementioned inadequacy of the phrase, thank you. It really is the best I can do for now. But as always, if you disagreed with anything here or if it didn't make any sense, please feel free to let me know so that I can try to address any misconceptions in the comments. But with that said, I wish you all the very best going forward. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.